Before we begin, if you're someone who feels everything deeply, who picks up on energies others miss, who's been told you're too sensitive but knows there's something more to it, this video is for you. Make sure you subscribe to Empire of the Mind and hit that notification bell, because we're exploring the intersection of psychology, spirituality, and what it really means to be deeply attuned to life itself. Now, let me ask you something. Why do some people feel deeply connected to meaning, intuition, and the divine, while others move through life emotionally disconnected, almost numb to the deeper currents running beneath everything? Why do empaths seem to carry an invisible antenna for suffering, beauty, truth, and the sacred, while others can walk through the same room and feel nothing at all? Carl Jung, one of the most profound psychological minds of the 20th century, believed that sensitivity is not weakness. It's not a flaw in your personality or a deficit in your emotional armor. No, sensitivity is psychological openness to what Jung called the self, that deeper center of being that connects us to something far greater than our individual ego. And today, we're going to explore exactly why empaths feel closer to God, what that connection really means, and how to protect it without losing yourself in the process. 1. Empathy as psychological receptivity. Let's start with the foundation. What makes an empath different isn't just that they feel more, it's that they have what Jung would call thin psychological boundaries. Think of most people as having thick walls between their inner world and the outer world. They can encounter emotion, chaos, suffering, beauty, and it stays outside. It doesn't penetrate. It doesn't shake them. But empaths? Their boundaries are like silk curtains instead of brick walls, permeable, translucent. Everything passes through. They don't just observe emotion, they feel it as if it were their own. They don't just notice the atmosphere of a room, they absorb it, embody it, carry it home with them. They pick up on unspoken truths, the subtext beneath conversations, the tension nobody's naming, the grief someone's hiding behind a smile. And here's where Jung comes in. He believed that people with this kind of sensitivity are more receptive to unconscious material. Not just their own unconscious, but the collective unconscious, that deep reservoir of human experience, symbols, archetypes, and spiritual truths that we all share, but most people never access directly. Empaths are like radio receivers tuned to frequencies most people don't even know exist. This is why empaths are often more aware of suffering, not because they seek it out, but because they can't feel it. They're more attuned to conscience, that inner moral compass that whispers when something's wrong, even if everyone else is going along with it. And they have a heightened sense of interconnectedness, the understanding that we're not isolated islands, but part of a vast web of relationships, energies, and meaning. This receptivity is what creates that sense of closeness to God, to the divine, to something larger. Because when you can feel the invisible threads connecting all things, when you can sense the sacred in silence, when beauty moves you to tears and injustice burns in your chest, you're not just thinking about spirituality, you're living it. You're experiencing it directly through your very nervous system. 2. Why empaths seek meaning. Now here's the crucial part. Empaths don't just feel more, they need more. Specifically, they need meaning. They feel an inner dissonance, almost a psychic pain, when life lacks purpose, when things feel shallow, when the script they're handed doesn't match the depth they sense underneath everything. Jung said something profound about this. He said the psyche naturally seeks meaning, the way the body seeks oxygen. It's not optional, it's not a luxury. And for the empath, suffering without meaning becomes absolutely unbearable. You can endure almost anything if it means something, if it's part of a greater pattern, if it serves growth or love or truth. But meaningless suffering, pointless pain, a life of going through the motions, that's spiritual death for an empath. This is exactly why empaths are drawn so powerfully to spirituality, to philosophy, to healing work, to anything that deals with depth and truth. They can't do surface level. They can't pretend the mystery doesn't exist. They can't ignore the questions that keep most people up at 3 a.m. questions about purpose, about God, about why we're here, about what happens when we die, about whether love is real or just chemical reactions. Empaths are seekers by nature because they're wired to detect that something more exists. They might explore religion, mysticism, psychology, art, nature. Whatever pathway leads them closer to that sense of divine meaning they can feel, but can't always name. They're not satisfied with explanations that reduce life to mechanics and accidents. They know they feel that there's something sacred woven into the fabric of existence. And this seeking isn't escapism. It's not avoiding reality. It's actually the opposite. It's refusing to accept the shallow version of reality that our culture often sells us. It's insisting that depth matters, that souls are real, that the invisible world is just as important as the visible one. 3. The danger of over-identification. But here's where we have to pause and talk about the shadow side of all this sensitivity. Because Jung wasn't just a romantic idealist, he was deeply practical about the dangers of psychological imbalance. And he warned that sensitivity without boundaries leads straight to burnout, exploitation, and what we might call spiritual self-destruction. See, empaths face a very specific temptation. They begin to confuse their gifts with obligations. They feel someone's pain, and they think, I must fix this. They sense a need, and they think, I must fill it. They receive an intuition, and they think, this must be a divine assignment I can't refuse. But here's the trap. They start confusing intuition with obligation, compassion with sacrifice, and divine calling with the compulsion to save everyone around them. This is how empaths get drained. This is how they lose themselves. This is how they become martyrs instead of healers. Because there's a difference, a critical difference between feeling with someone and taking on their burden as if it's yours to carry. There's a difference between being moved by suffering and believing you're personally responsible for ending all of it. And here's the truly insidious part. This is exactly how narcissists, manipulators, and energy vampires exploit empaths. They've learned that empaths can be hooked through their spirituality. You tell an empath, a truly spiritual person would help me, or if you really cared, you'd sacrifice more, or God is calling you to save me. And the empath's own sensitivity becomes the weapon used against them. Jung understood this. He knew that without proper boundaries, the empath doesn't become more spiritual, they become a doormat. They become depleted, resentful, and sick. Their connection to the divine gets hijacked and turned into a guilt mechanism that others can pull like a lever whenever they want something. The empath starts to believe that their worth is measured by how much they give, how much they endure, how much of themselves they can pour out until there's nothing left. And that's not spirituality. That's self-abandonment dressed up in holy language. 4. Healthy divine connection. So what does a healthy divine connection actually look like for an empath? How do you stay open to the sacred without bleeding out? How do you maintain that beautiful sensitivity without becoming a spiritual casualty? Jung's answer was clear. True spiritual connection strengthens boundaries. It doesn't dissolve them. A grounded empath, someone who's integrated their sensitivity with wisdom, operates from a completely different place. They feel compassion without self-erasure. They can sit with someone in their pain without absorbing it as their own. They can witness suffering without taking personal responsibility for fixing what isn't theirs to fix. A healthy empath serves without martyrdom. They give from overflow, not from depletion. They know the difference between generosity and self-betrayal. They understand that saying no to someone else's expectations might be saying yes to their own soul's integrity. And that's not selfish, that's sacred self-respect. They listen without absorbing. This is huge. They can hold space for someone's emotions, their story, their darkness without letting it move into their own body and set up camp there. They develop what we might call spiritual discernment, the ability to sense what's theirs and what isn't, what's a genuine calling and what's manipulation, what's divine guidance, and what's just guilt wrapped in spiritual language. Jung believed deeply that integration, not suffering, is the goal of psychological and spiritual development. Integration means bringing all parts of yourself into conscious relationship, your sensitivity and your strength, your openness and your boundaries, your compassion and your self-preservation. It means you don't have to choose between being spiritual and being whole. In fact, you can't be truly spiritual without being whole. A grounded empath recognizes that their sensitivity is a gift meant to enhance their life and their service, not destroy it. They learn to filter, to ground, to release what isn't theirs. They might develop practices, energy clearing, conscious breathing, time in nature, creative expression, therapy, meditation, whatever helps them stay connected to the divine while remaining rooted in their own being. They also learn to trust their boundaries as a spiritual practice, because when you honor your limits, you're honoring the temple that houses your spirit. When you refuse to let others drain you, you're protecting the very sensitivity that allows you to serve authentically. When you say, "I can't carry this for you, but I can witness you carrying it," that's not abandonment, that's mature love. So let me bring this home. Empathy opens the door to God, but wisdom decides how wide. Your sensitivity, your ability to feel deeply, to sense the sacred, to pick up on truths others miss, that's not a curse you need to fix or a weakness you need to overcome. It's a form of spiritual perception, a way of knowing that goes beyond logic and touches the divine directly. But the empath's task, your task, if this is you, is not to bleed for the world. It's not to prove your worth through endless sacrifice. It's not to let your sensitivity become the hook that others use to drain your light. Your task is to remain whole within the world, to stay open without becoming a wound, to serve without disappearing, to feel deeply while standing firmly in your own truth, because the world doesn't need more empaths who've martyred themselves into exhaustion. The world needs empaths who've learned to integrate their gifts with wisdom, who can hold both compassion and boundaries, both openness and protection, both divine connection and earthly presence. That's the path Jung pointed toward, not transcendence through suffering, but transformation through integration, not holiness through self-destruction, but wholeness through conscious choice. If this resonated with you, if you felt seen and understood in these words, do me a favor, subscribe to Empire of the Mind right now, because we're going deeper into these territories where psychology meets spirituality, where ancient wisdom meets modern understanding, where your sensitivity isn't a problem to solve, but a doorway to walk through consciously. Hit that subscribe button. Join this community of deep feelers, truth seekers, and conscious explorers, because your empathy is needed, but only if you're still standing to offer it. Stay whole, stay grounded, and keep that door to the divine open on your terms. This is Empire of the Mind. I'll see you in the next one.